But what they had was, this is a days before low flash powders. Now, 125 357 Magnum throws a 25 yard ball of flame down range with it.
I'm Ryan Gresham, and this is Gun Talk Nation. This Gun Talk Nation is brought to you by Caldwell, Franklin Armory, RCBS, Ruger, Range Ready, Remington, EOTech, Stag Arms, Securit, Silencer Central, SDS Imports, and BuildBox. Hey, welcome into Gun Talk Nation. Today on Gun Talk Nation, we're going to talk fighting with guns, fighting with revolvers, I don't know, trauma medicine. We'll see where we go with this. So we've got the guys from American Fighting Revolver. Darryl Bolke, say hello.
Hey, good to be here. We always love being down here at Range Ready.
Brian Eastridge.
Hey, Brian with a Y.
All right.
Good to be back in Louisiana.
Yeah. So you guys listening, you'll be able to tell there are two people talking to us. So you guys were down here. I guess what was it, February or March, something like that. The Lipsy's Smith & Wesson Ultimate Carry UC.
Yep, the launch for that. We were involved in that project pretty early.
Yeah.
Kind of helping out as a balance for Jason at Lipsy's and the Smith & Wesson team on getting that gun worked out. So it was great to come back and do the training event for the media release on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are the American Fighting Revolver guys, so that's it seems appropriate. Now, you guys were here this week because we had the Colt Python experience. So, I mean, I think people heard us talking about it. Super cool event, super fun. Everybody were shooting Colt Pythons and just drilling with revolvers, which, I mean, I guess maybe I'd love to start out. There's a lot of places we could start. Why don't we start here? Why are we talking about revolvers?
Because they're cool, man.
They're certainly cool, but the reality is they still have a place. Mm-hmm. And, sadly, everybody's got so into the new whiz-bang of, sort of the Toyota Camrys of current polymer disposable, semi-automatic pistols, and that's great. The reality is, though, these classic revolvers, we're in a heyday of materials and stuff. We make some really good practical revolvers. But for a lot of people who either aren't super dedicated, that just want sort of that fire extinguisher in the home, God, the manual of arms is so simple. They're very, very forgiving of mistakes. They're easy to use. They're easy to carry. They're legal everywhere. Mm-hmm. You're not going to run into magazine restrictions and that type of things. Ammunition is not driving the gun, so they're very robust as far as shooter-induced malfunctions with not gripping the gun hard enough, whatever. They're great with the ammo that's available. They'll often shoot anything from a target load to a hunting load. You can pretty much tailor the use of the gun just based on ammunition because it's not running the gun, your finger is. There's just so many positives to them, and it's sort of sad to us that a lot of that's been lost. I mean, we still carry these guns every day, all the time.
Well, Brian, you don't seem like you're, no offense, Darryl, but Brian, you don't seem like you're old enough to like revolvers. It's supposed to be an old guy thing.
Right. Well, I spent my 45th birthday down here with you guys the other day. So. Yeah. And I think I caught the tail end of it, but I grew up with them. Mm-hmm. It was granddad, dad. Somebody had a, police trade-in gun or something like that. And when I got into law enforcement, I got really deeply rooted into revolvers because, my dad always carried a backup gun, and you're trying to emulate somebody, one of your heroes. So I get into police work and. Well, I got to have an ankle gun too, and the revolver was just really good for that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second because revolvers, especially, some snubby type revolver, seems to be a popular backup gun, certainly an ankle gun. Why do those work so well for that purpose?
Well, a number of reasons. Mine was just sheerly from I grew up in that era when law enforcement was transitioning to semi-autos, and maybe they didn't have the reputation for reliability because the training world and all that didn't really understand how to keep a semi-auto in the fight.
Yeah.
And, we're in a heyday now. Most semi-autos are exceptionally reliable. The other thing was in the 80s, ammunition. You had departments buying cheap ammo. So the old heads were, well, I carry a revolver because I know it'll work. That was kind of the theory.
For me, in that backup deep concealment role, size doesn't matter with a revolver. The reality with the semi-autos is the smaller you get, the harder they are to run, and they're in particular, they get much less reliable with that reciprocating slide mass.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder for the shooter
to keep
that
run it
gun
reliable and
just,
the gun.
And just
mechanically, you're doing a lot in a small space.
Yeah.
When inertia and bullet mass and all that is running the gun. With these, your trigger runs the gun. So it doesn't matter how small we make that revolver, it will go bang like a big one. And so when we're putting these little guns into ankle rigs, pockets, below the waistline carry, fanny packs, purses, all of these different places, and try and deploy these guns out of them and have them work, and those are pretty tough environments too. You get all the dust bunnies and junk and lipstick and chapstick and keys and all these things that can get into triggers and all that. The revolvers are just much better when we make them little.
Yeah.
You also look at sort of a power to weight ratio. We're taking these little guns and they don't lose a lot. Ammunition wise, we can still get good deep penetrating ammunition into very small packages, even down into the 22s now. We have deep penetrating self-defense ammo that run out of a small 8-shot, easy to shoot snub. I mean,
wait a minute. He just said 22s. Some digital range officer is going to lose their brains right now going, wait a minute. No, he didn't say 22s.
The key with these is its penetration is really everything. Back in the old days, because I was there in the old days, the bad Santa
Hell, I was
here.
there.
Yeah, is
Thanks, Elmer.
Remember when 9mm didn't work? Well, the problem was a lot of those lightweight expanding 9mm just didn't go deep.
Yeah.
And now we have these deep penetrating, pretty reliably expanding 9mm, and I would contend they're still not an 11mm.
Yeah.
By the same token, now we're getting 32s, 22s that will go blow entire blocks of gelatin. They'll go deep. They do everything we need them to do. And I'll contend that if, having been on enough autopsies, you find me a coroner that can tell the difference between any of those things going through a body without knowing ahead of time what the round was, of just looking at a hole or a bullet track or something in a body and really being able with any level of authority to say, I can tell the difference between, a 22. The 22s get down into that range where you kind of can
kind of tell. Sure.
Kind of tell. But when you start getting 32, 38, 9mm, 40, 45, there's really not much difference when they're going through. It's how hard they're hitting and how deep they're going.
Well, and also shot placement, right?
Shot as far as placement is everything.
That's everything. I know you guys really harp on that in the class. It's like people go, I hit center of mass, center of target, or whatever it is, and you guys are going, no, there's a 5-inch circle. Is anything outside of that is we're going to kind of consider a miss at this point. But going back to what you were saying is the finger runs the gun, not the ammo. I mean, just to kind of elaborate in case that's going past anybody's head. I mean, if you run a really light load or a really hot load on a semi-auto, it can cause malfunctions. It can cause problems. Fair enough.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, a revolver kind of don't care. I mean, if you hit the primer, it goes off. The bullet's going to come out the end, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. all the mechanics of the gun are driven with your finger.
Yeah.
Every mechanical operation that goes on in the gun is driven. It's powered by your, whatever appendage you have driving the trigger.
Yeah. And the 357 Magnum was, I mean, statistically for law enforcement, it was like the man stopper, right? It was kind of the magic, was a 125 grain.
Yeah, it's funny. I just wrote a big article about that. That's on our site behind the paywall. But what was amazing about that is a lot of that was reputation more than what was actually or there were some other factors involved. So
was that just lore, just like that really hits hard.
This is a lot of what we do. The lore of that, those 125 357 mag loads, and it all started really with Super Val. It was really the dynamic that changed that, and then they got canceled by big ammunition companies and just copying it.
Yeah.
But the problem is we didn't have the type of testing we do now with human tissue simulants and things like that. The problem with that ammo is it generally overexpanded. It expanded too fast.
It had so much velocity.
It had so much velocity and all this, and would overexpand and really not go deep and stuff. But what they had was, this is a days before low flash powders. Now, 125 357 Magnum throws a 25 yard ball of flame downrange with it, and the noise and stuff. And when we looked at a lot of the shootings that were spectacular stops, what we were finding is you're inside of 6 feet range. You're a couple yards away. They're generally in low light and shot from 4-inch barrels or less. So what's coming out the front of that gun?
It's a flamethrower.
Is thunder and lightning with a projectile attached.
Yeah.
And what was really decking people, I had a mentor friend who worked with all the big counter-terrorist teams of the 70s and 80s, and those guys loved those snub 357s for doing tubular assaults on aircraft and buses and all that stuff. And he called it. He goes, man, they're 38 specials with a flashbang attached to them.
So it wasn't necessarily just the actual performance into bad guy, but it's actually
a bit
of a mental thing of like they're perhaps giving up, shutting down, getting overwhelmed.
It's like every sense in my body has been overwhelmed and I've been shot.
Yeah.
There's kind of that added thing. Now, you get into the end of the 80s, the real good round that we saw, very consistent, amazing performance, was the 145 silver tips. And silver tip and revolvers was great compared to its performance in autos. It was generally light for caliber in autos and lacked a lot of the penetration. The revolver rounds in silver tip were fantastic. But the end of that era with the FBI, they started putting low flash powder in. And it really changed kind of the dynamic of the round.
Interesting.
And we really started going with the revolvers into the deep penetrating heavier rounds. And that's out of the hunting world.
Sure.
Because the reality of this is human beings are basically deer-sized animals that kind of run from whitetails through muleys. And the things that work on those animals are exactly the same that work on people, as would you ever take a hunter out who couldn't do a heart-lung shot on an animal? I mean, no guide would ever do that for the ethical taking of those animals. It's exactly the same with the self-defense stuff. You've got to hit those very specific critical areas, and the round has to get deep enough to get into those areas.
You know EOTech for high-quality optics, but here's a new one, the EOTech HWS EXP S3 DCR. I know that's a lot of letters, but what does DCR mean? Danger Close Reticle. Provides fast and accurate shots at typical distances, but also an effective close combat aiming point. It's kind of 2 reticles in one, which is great for an optic like this. You can learn more at eotechinc.com. RCBS was founded in 1943 by Fred Huntington in Oroville, California, and they're still at it today, making dies and shell holders, presses, and all sorts of reloading supplies, trusted for decades. Get into reloading again with RCBS, rcbs.com. Franklin Armory binary triggers just got an upgrade. The new AR Elite trigger. Of course, the binary firing system is a 3-position trigger. You can safe, you can fire it semi-auto, but in the 3rd position, it fires 1 round on pull and 1 round on release. Now, the new AR Elite trigger comes with premium features, including interchangeable trigger bows. So you can choose between a curved trigger or a straight flat face trigger. Also easy to install, straight, smooth trigger pull, 4.5 pounds plus or minus a half pound. Positive reset. So go check it out, franklinarmory.com. Let's talk about Tokarev shotguns. Turkish made, quality. We've been shooting them a little bit more lately, and we were out on the range with the Tokarev TAR 20. And this is kind of looks like an AR-15, but it's in 20 gauge, 3-inch chamber 20 gauge, detachable box magazine, 18.5-inch barrel. And the big deal is, right on their website, $329. So pretty value price. So check them out, TokarevUSA.com. Enter to win the Ultimate Builder Giveaway presented by BuildBox. Here's your chance to win from over 100 incredible prizes from top brands like Caldwell, Real Avid, Wheeler Tools, Brownells, Aero Precision, Timney Triggers, Ballistic Advantage, EOTech, and Tipton, and even more. You can also win guns built on the show. Don't miss out. Visit BuildBoxTV.com to enter and gear up for your next build. Aero Precision, known for helping you do gun builds, especially AR-15s, and they're still knocking out their monthly limited edition builder sets. It's going to stand out at the range among your family and friends when you're shooting. You got to go check out their builder sets, and even if you miss out on this one, the next one's going to be really cool because every single month I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool too. You can learn more over at AeroPrecisionUSA.com. Brian, I think about when people say Revolver's great because it's simple, which is true, right? But then I've also, you guys are not only revolver shooters, you shoot all guns.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people go, what gun should I get? They ask you probably all the time, what gun should I get? And I feel like the just get a revolver was kind of a go-to old school piece of advice. I would say, well, a full-size 9mm pistol perhaps is easier to shoot than certain revolvers, because the whole, I'm going to get my wife a snubby because my wife's small and a snubby is small. It's like, I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I grew up in the 80s gun shop, where we got all of our information from these paper things called magazines, right? And that was kind of the mantra of the 80s gun shop. Well, my wife's at home. She's a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just get her a snub revolver or something like that. And if you look at, well, what was the purpose of it? Well, it's the same as a fire extinguisher.
She wasn't going to carry it.
No, it wasn't a tool that they were going to live with every day. It was something that was going to be, stowed away, loaded, that, and think of the era. Semi-autos in that era were just kind of okay, right? They
definitely not the quality we have today.
Yeah. Right. We're in a golden era of guns in general, but so it was the fire extinguisher theory. And I went through that development of, why would I ever recommend somebody, a small statured female to shoot a 38 plus P or something like that out of a small revolver? Well, if you look at, if it's just a fire extinguisher, and that's probably the most simple manual of arms, the ammunition that's in the gun's likely to work, and I don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance to that gun because it's not being shot or carried.
Yeah.
So were they right? Yeah, in that context, they were. But we've got a lot of good options today for revolvers, which back in those days, it was kind of, stocks and stuff like that. Unless you were an enthusiast, it was kind of not commonplace, right?
Yeah.
You just out of the box, put 6 rounds in it, put it in your nightstand, and 10 years later, it, was in a garage sale or something. But yeah, that's kind of where my take on that came from.
I think some of it was the right gun, wrong application, or which one.
Yeah.
When people ask us, hey, I've got a relative who's not a dedicated shooter or somebody that I just want to get them a gun to keep in their house, and Brian and I are pretty much get them a medium framed revolver.
Yeah.
Made of steel. A full weight, medium frame, something with a manageable trigger and good sights, and that's an easy. Well, that's what we recommend because they're fairly easy to shoot, and then we can size grips to whatever size they are. The problem is a lot of people recommend these airweight, super lightweight guns because, this is really easy to hold.
Right.
And then
you shoot 'em.
and then the gun shop commandos come in and you've got to shoot 357 Magnum because 38 doesn't work. And it's why we have pushed so hard for things like the 32.
Yeah.
I get 6 shots. I can pick ammo from 32 short that is like 22. 32 long is what most of us are running because we can run some deep penetrating 32 long, almost recoilless.
Yeah.
All the way into 32 H&R, and then in the steel guns, we'll go all the way up to 327 Fed Mag. That is,
awesome.
I mean, if I was in the back country, I wouldn't feel bad about for a trail gun, for predators and stuff like that of running through full house 327. But my little airweight, the gun I got in my pocket right now is a 432 UC with a titanium cylinder in it.
You're welcome, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Super
Brian
lightweight.
built for me. Yeah, that's super lightweight. I mean, it's a sub 13 ounce gun, and it's loaded up with a 32 long loaded to 30 or 32 H&R loaded to a 32 long velocity with deep penetrating ammunition. And I mean, it's an easy gun to carry and shoot.
Yeah.
I don't want to shoot a 13 ounce or a 12 and a half ounce 357 mag. You're torturing yourself for no apparent reason, and I'm used to it. Can imagine giving that to somebody who has no idea what they're doing, and often with an instructor who has no idea how to train anybody to shoot a revolver.
Well, I think airweights are great if you go to a gun show, because you can usually pick up an airweight and a box of 48 rounds.
Right.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And that was the
Only
same
shot twice.
Yeah, back in the day of the 44 mags, everybody wanted the Dirty Harry gun right up until you shot some of that full house 44, no flash retardant, full house, 240 grain 44 mag. That is not fun even in a 6.5 inch end frame.
Yeah.
So.
But even in the movies, they gave us a pretty good piece of information on the 44 mag. If you remember the Magnum Force movie, I don't know if he can handle the recoil. Well, I keep it loaded with a light special. I'm like, that should have been a clue.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Even Clint was shooting a light special.
Well, that's a good point, though. 357 versus 38 special, 44 versus 40 special. I mean, I think we could all agree we'd rather either one of us or your wife or your grandma or your mom or whatever hit 5 or 6 times with a 38 special, wad cutters,
right,
versus a 357 and she can't hit anything.
And is scared to pull the trigger again.
Right.
Because it's almost as abusive on the shooter as anybody else.
Yeah, it's miserable.
And if you read the internet, everybody's not miserable. But, you saw what we do in a training class on our expectations of students of what they need, of what a hit looks like to us versus what a hit looks like on a public shooting range or shooting cans in a gravel pit is a big difference. Yeah. So when we sit there and go, when we put you on a clock on a 5.5 inch target, it's a different ball game of what your recovery times and accuracy look like.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference is what standard are you really working to? I mean, you can take that 357 mag airweight whatever and hit a zombie target at 2 feet somewhere.
Right.
But when we are demanding that you hit inside of a 5.5 inch circle at speed, all of a sudden it's a bit, and do that multiple times, all of a sudden that's a bit of a different ball game.
We were filming a segment for Guns and Gear 1 or 2 years ago, and it was the Smith & Wesson, the real lightweight
Scandium 340.
Yeah, it was a 44 mag, I believe.
329, worst thing ever invented.
So I'm like, well, I need to shoot this on camera with 44 Magnum to show the audience the recoil and the blast, and it'll be cool. And the camera guys, you guys have been filming with us for several days. You know how it is. It's like, cool, that was great. Do it again. Do that again. Do this again. Now we're going to shoot in slow-mo, and let me switch the camera to slow-mo. I said, listen up, guys. I'm going to shoot 3 shots in real time, and then we're going to switch it. I'm going to shoot 3 shots in slow-mo, and that's all I'm going to do.
Right.
And they were like laughing, like, are you serious? I went, oh, I'm serious, because this is going to be miserable. It's like getting punched in the hand.
And
did you have the wood grips on it too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I had to do one of those for a media thing as well for an article, and it was one of the wood grips on that gun was one, and shooting full house 44 mag was one of the worst experiences of my life.
And I mean, look, I'm not saying the gun is no good. I mean, yes,
it's great for what it is.
Great for carrying. I want something light. I'm going to carry it. And chances are, even if you had that load with a 44 mag, and a cougar or a bear comes chasing you down, you may not even feel the recoil, and you're gonna rip out 5 or 6 shots, and it's fine. But man, to just sit there on the range and shoot it, you want some soft 44 special loads.
And pro tip on those, well, it was funny. Darryl was on the West Coast doing a media workup, and I was doing some testing on scope mounts back in the Midwest, same gun, and I took the grips off a 500 mag. The Hogue wraparounds that had the nice cushy rubber on it, put those on the gun and loaded it with 44 specials. And that's a fantastic.
There you go.
Real good. Yeah.
That's a good point. Perhaps brings us into another point is, in the past, I was kind of like a stock guy. Like I just, whatever, it comes, I shoot it or I drive it or whatever it is. But like talking about how certain simple changes, customizations to a gun could change your whole experience. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Brian, over to you.
I mean, you're the guy who tweaks everything.
Yeah. And in the Revolver era, I got lucky to be under the tutelage of Jimmy Ray from the Performance Center at Smith & Wesson for, several days and seeing cops that carried the wheel guns. The agency I worked for stopped issuing revolvers in '89, and so '90s the first Glocks, and I hire on in 2002. That's a 12, 13-year gap. So your senior field patrol guys, a lot of them were still carrying revolvers. Mm-hmm. None of them had the same stocks on the revolver. All of us that were issued a Glock had some kind of boot or rubber or something to make it a little more comfortable to shoot. We were shooting 40 Smith & Wesson Glocks, right? Yeah. And I'm looking at it going, man, I really wish if I had that wheel gun and I could shave a little bit of wood off of this side or that and make this a little more pleasant, or polish the trigger face, which don't do that with polymer,
Right.
So we could really tailor those guns. And then the actions out of the box in that era, they were fair to partly cloudy, right? Mm-hmm. But somebody with a moderate amount of skill could make those things just absolutely fantastic with the trigger weight and just the smoothness of the action. So, I wanted to be one of those guys. So I took that tutelage and started tinkering with revolvers and going, really, there's really not a whole lot to an action job if you know what you're doing. You can make these things fantastic. So,
Brian does a lot of the action work on my stuff, and it's not light. It's just smooth. He's doing a what we would have considered a police duty action. It's what a lot of the armors were trained to do back in the old days, of just smoothing the gun up, but they didn't lower those trigger weights. They were still heavy. The other thing about a revolver, and Brian, I'll steal the line from Brian, because we use it all the time. You're a screwdriver away from custom fitting that gun to anybody's hand.
Yeah.
Is that, we get that sometimes. Like, good example was the UCs. They came with those, VZ grips that are a bit different than anything that's come before it. And we've had some people who absolutely love them, and other people are like, I hate the grips on that gun. And we tell them, well, that you just pull your screwdriver out and put on whatever you want on those guns.
Even I could do that. This is no gunsmithing.
Yeah, this isn't even real gunsmithing. It's like, just get a screwdriver. It doesn't even have to be one of the really good ones that we use on the other screws on the gun. Just get a screwdriver off your Leatherman tool, and you can change the grips on that gun to whatever you want. If you want them cushy, stuff like the Hogue Tamers, we use those on training guns, specifically because they take that bite out of the web of the hand. If you're carrying a pocket gun, you want to go to something like a boot grip. Mm-hmm. If you're using it as an appendix or a hip carried gun, you want something longer and cushy that you can kind of anchor.
Tailor the grip how you're carrying it.
Right, and that can all be on the same gun. I can take a small frame revolver that I'm pocket carrying, but hey, I'm going to go shoot a class, and I've done that. I've actually, went and shot a match with my pocket gun And before the match, I pulled the boot grips off and put some full length ones on there and threw it in an appendix rig and shot a match. I mean, it's doable. Or you're going to go out and do some maybe range training or a specific class that I don't want the little tiny grips on. You change it and tailor it to that. So it's one of the big Revolver benefits if we can fit that gun right to your hand or right to what you're doing. And that's a great modification, so to speak. And, you look at a lot of my guns, I'm running, stags on them because I think they're pretty, but I also have those specifically made that fit my hand. The guy who does those is every time he does a real big set that are fat, I mean, I'm all over those. He's like, they're almost those are Darryl grips. Yeah, those are Darryl grips, so.
The ammo you choose for personal defense is just as important as the gun. Remington Personal Defense Ammo is trusted by law enforcement and knowledgeable citizens. Try Golden Saber Bonded for tough performance or Ultimate Defense Handgun in your concealed carry firearm. For compact handguns, Golden Saber Defense Compact is specially designed to perform. Go to Remington.com to see all the personal defense ammo options. SecureItGunStorage.com. We talk about Secure It because they make just really cool products, and we have a bunch of them here. We have the lockers, we have some of their agile safes, and when people come into Gun Talk headquarters, we often get that question of like, ooh, what's these? They're all stacked up, and it's like a cool wall of storage for your guns and your gear, but they do a good job of providing a lot of different options for storing your goods, gun walls, accessories, and you can kind of customize the configuration inside to really maximize the space for what you want it to work for. So you can learn more over at SecureItGunStorage.com. New from Caldwell, it's the Velociradar with Chirp radar technology for more accurate readings from your chronograph. Tracks bullets downrange at various distances, giving you the full picture of ballistic performance. Easy to set up and an app to track all of your data all year long. Go check it out at caldwellshooting.com. Range Ready is where we run our classes, rangereadystudios.com. So go over there to check out the classes and events that we have going on. These things go fast. Another little known thing about Range Ready is we will provide you a pistol if you need one for running a class, or even an AR. But there's no charge for that. We don't rent you a gun and there's an upcharge. It's just available for your use. So it's a pretty cool deal. Go check it out, rangereadystudios.com. Hodgdon, they're the gunpowder people. And one of the ones that people really like is Hodgdon CFE BLK, CFE Black, optimized for 300 AAC blackout subsonic loads, but it's also ideal for the 17 Hornet, 7.62x39, 221 Fireball. So you have some options on things that you can load with this powder. One of the cool things about this, the CFE contains the copper fouling eraser ingredient, originally used in military propellant, which greatly deters copper fouling and contributes to longer periods of top accuracy with less barrel cleaning time. We like this. Go check them out over at Hodgdon.com. Ruger, one of the popular ones, one of the kind of cool fun ones they're doing is the Ruger LC Charger. It's chambered in 5.7x28, low recoiling cartridge, available in an array of options for target shooting, small game, personal defense. It's kind of a large format pistol, and you kind of have to see it to understand it, but it's a 10.3-inch barrel. So let that sink in for a second. Yes, it's a threaded barrel. Yes, they have a CNC milled handguard that works with M-Lock, full-length pick rail on top for optics. Just a fun, cool gun. The whole thing only weighs 66 ounces. So go check it out over at Ruger.com. Let's talk about, because you guys were both law enforcement for decades. Been there, done that, seen it in action. My impression is this is not you guys being the Revolver guys because you refuse to, grow with the times, change with the times, or anything like that. My impression is you like them. And I think a lot of people are discovering, it's one of the reasons we were talking about lever guns being so popular. I think you could be a guy listening to this, and you could be not an old guy. You could be, 40 years old, and you're like, okay, I own several polymer pistols. I own several ARs. I own whatever, a Benelli M4. But it's like at some point, if you are into guns, you start thinking, what else is there? I don't need a 6th AR or a 5th Glock or whatever it might be, right? So like they're buying lever guns. I think there's something to revolvers, but that's one reason. But I want to see if you guys could kind of help the audience to say, no, this is because you're called American Fighting Revolvers. Talk about use case and real life stories that you guys
I'm going to give you a twofold for me personally. And I'm sure Brian's going to have a take on this as well. For me, it's two very specific things in today's day and age. Why a revolver? And we're going to have obviously some discussion and training on that. But for anybody out there, even if you're not like us who like revolvers, and even with the practical stuff, one of the analogies I use for one set of people is it's like learning to drive a manual transmission vehicle. Like I haven't had a car with a manual in years, but I know how to drive one. It's a good skill to have that I'm not limited to just because most of the vehicles I have now have electronic fuel injection and automatic transmission. I really turn a key and somebody else changes the oil. Right. I mean, that's great, but is it a good skill to have to maybe learn how to drive a car that has a manual transmission, to maybe know how to change oil if you had to, or change a spare tire? These are a bit older skills, but they're probably good to have and will make you a better shooter to master these, or at least have a fundamental understanding. And here's the other one. I travel a lot with revolvers because whether I'm doing specialized security work or training or whatever, when I get on an airplane today, and this is true for everybody in America, in today's travel environment, you have no idea where that plane is going to land when you're done. Now, you might be going from your gun-friendly state to another gun-friendly state, and something happens, and you land in a different place.
All the planes are grounded all of a sudden. Who knows?
That hates semi-automatic anything. That has magazine bans in place.
That gun's not legal here.
That has ammunition restrictions. And a lot of that is even certain cities within a state where it might be legal in the state, but that city has bans against certain types of ammunition or whatever. The beauty is I can get on a plane with a couple of revolvers, and I don't care where we land or where I'm driving through or where I end up. I have a generally legal gun, and I also have a gun that's publicly of the people who are going to be on your jury.
Yeah.
Because it's a jury of somebody else's peers. They're not gun talk listeners. That's not going to be on your jury.
It might be your easiest jury ever if you have a bunch of gun talk listeners.
That's not who's going to be on it. You're going to have a bunch of people who are not like you on a jury. And these are very easy guns to take the gun out of the equation, and we can just look at the situation. So again, that is a very practical thing. And when you bring up the lever guns, the pump shotguns, things like that, that is all stuff that is still, they might not like it, but it's acceptable pretty much nationwide. That if you had to get in, say your RV, go on vacation, or you're taking a trip, or you're getting on a plane, or whatever the case may be, these are great firearms to travel with, to not get yourself in some sort of legal trouble. And most people, I always drive the speed limit and I do this and I never. Are you sure you're not going to get in an accident somewhere? Are you sure you're not going to control that? You sure you're not going to end up in a hospital somewhere, or that there's some things that you may lose? Somebody may be going through your vehicle and find that AR that's in the trunk, or find that high capacity pistol that's somewhere, or that your plane lands and it goes through an X-ray machine and somebody's looking at a bunch of 17, 20 round magazines and lose their mind because it's an easy pick. Versus most people look at this stuff and go, it's like, I had to do a deal where I had to be a very low profile thing. I took literally a Ruger 22 LCR as my only gun. And I remember checking in at the airport with the micro-sized Plano case that is exactly the size of that LCR. It's tiny. And, I go to check in and declare the gun, and the guy almost laughed at me. It was like, oh, don't worry about that,
Like you barely have to even tell them.
Yeah,
right?
and in the old days, at one point I worked for Aimpoint for a lot of years, and, I'd get on a plane with 14 ARs.
Right.
And, and everybody looks at you like you're a terrorist, and then you get on a plane with, this little box with a revolver in it, and nobody cares. It's like you're traveling with golf clubs.
What can be done with a revolver? I mean, real life stories. I think you guys were telling a few during the class as far as defensive use, law enforcement use of real life using a revolver. Cause people love their semi-automatics and they can have an extra mag, but I don't know. There's an argument about how many shots are you actually going to shoot? And Brian, you look like you've got thoughts.
Yeah, I did some deep dive on that, like with reliability, because I've heard all these horror stories, how terribly unreliable revolvers are. And a lot of that came out of training classes and not necessarily real world applications. And so I went through some archives, interviewed some of the older guys in the agency. I'm like, do you ever remember of a revolver failing in in an actual defensive shooting?
Mm-hmm.
And there was one that was really kind of an anomaly. The guy ended up falling on ice and actually broke the hand of the revolver, so the cylinder wouldn't advance. And the guy manually turned the cylinder to actually fire the gun.
To fire more than one round.
Yeah. And I went, well, if you disabled your semi-auto, and I've seen that happen, you're going to need to go to the revolver on your ankle, right?
Right.
Your secondary became your primary. So there wasn't all these reports of, oh, well, they failed. They mechanically failed. You just didn't hear about those things. And in the golden era of reliable polymer striker fired guns, a lot of times those guns are fired in time and space that doesn't look like our flat range shooting position.
Mm-hmm.
And grip. I hear instructors preach grip. Everything's about the grip. If you can grip the gun right, everything is fine. Well, that's 100% factual. But the first thing we watch fail in videos over and over and over is panic, and I get a crappy grip on the gun, and I disable my own firearm.
Like you said, you're barely holding on to the grip of a semi-auto, and you're not high up on the. It's like you got to get real high up on the grip. Well, that's great, but what if you're trying to draw while the guy's hitting you?
And bone muscle structure not locked, like inside of a vehicle or rolling around on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen countless examples of that. And I go, you don't see that with revolvers simply because your finger drives the gun. Your finger drives all the mechanical components of the gun.
I'll give you another one. How about contact shots? You
100%.
You press a semi-auto out of battery, it will not shoot.
We had that in an actual incident that one of the officer-involved shootings I worked was the officer had a SIG P220 buried inside of the crook, and the gun would not work until he was falling out of a vehicle, cleared enough distance to, nearly got killed because the gun wouldn't work because it was buried.
And that's hard to think through that. I know certain people drill it, but to think through it in the middle of something, to go, I need to back off, or I need to hold the slide, or whatever it is. Like
we just had an incident with one of our student, but also now teaching with us a bit. And it's a real good example of this. Officer gets in a fight over his gun. His polymer service pistol is discharged inside its holster during the fight with the crook hanging on the gun. And from the ground on his back in this kind of situation, left support hand only, deploys a small revolver out of his support side pocket, one-handed on the ground, already shot and injured, delivers, hits on target onto the bad guy and decks the guy. And that is a perfect example of why these are still relevant. The other side on the mindset, because I come from that academy prior to Brian. When I was in the police academy, if you don't get it done in 6, you are going to get killed. If you can't make solid hits inside of 6 rounds, you are going to die in the field. So, yeah, we had speed loaders and practiced all the reloads. They really came down hard that if you don't get it done in 6, you're going to die. And what we ended up having is a lot of low round count shootings.
Yeah.
Because the emphasis was so hard on hitting versus, don't worry, you got 20 chances.
Right.
You get that. You didn't see in those eras, you didn't see these like what we're seeing in massive mag dumps and panic, emotional shooting of if I just slap the trigger harder, faster, more, something will happen that will save my life. I mean, we had that mindset side drilled into our heads that you had to hit inside of 6. And I'm not saying there weren't people who emptied revolvers with no results. The reality was just the training mentality was completely different, and it was all about getting hits as opposed to how long can you stay in a fight with low amount of manipulations on the gun, which is what the semis give us. And it's just a change in mindset.
Yeah. So when people ask you guys, I mean, where would one start if they didn't own a revolver, but they go, all right, fine, you convinced me. This sounds like a good idea. Maybe I should own one. Maybe I should train with one. I mean, I kind of hate the gear question because it's kind of like, well, which gun should I get? Well, I don't know. There's 100 of them, right? But
which is best for me?
Is there a general advice of a place to start, or is there a general advice on technique and training and things of that nature? I mean,
well, I tell people now, if you are you're curious about revolvers, you can actually get into a fairly high quality revolver at a really low price point. And, I'll preface this with Darryl and I are brand agnostic about revolvers. We have worked with all the major companies, and we don't, elevate one above the other or any of that. But Taurus right now is making some exceptional revolvers in the sub $400 price point. And for that, it's backed by a really, really great warranty now. So the Taurus 856 Ultralight, I've got one in my bag out there that, we shot a little bit of stuff with the other day. That's a great place to start with a minimal investment in the gun. And, if it's not for you, it's not for you, but there's lots of support gear for it. So, you're getting into a decent quality revolver for service polymer auto money and you still have all that, the ability to tailor different stocks on the gun, grips, things like that. Different sights are available for them. So right now, I can really recommend if you don't want to make a large financial investment, you can do that with a revolver now. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, there were really 2 companies that reigned king, and the third one was a little more utilitarian, right? So, and they were all at a pretty elevated price point. So,
when I'll throw out also, obviously, if you go buy a gun, you would think people would want to shoot it, but that's not always the case. People buy guns and just sit them there. If you are not used to shooting a revolver, you need to go shoot it. You need to go get several hundred rounds and go shoot it. And one of the things I would say is, it's not only the grip is different. It's not only that the trigger pull is probably different than your semi-auto. For a lot of them, the sight picture is different. The sight alignment is different. I think about kind of those snubbies where you're having to bury that front sight in that U-notch or whatever the rear sight is. It's, for me, I shoot a lot of guns. I have to consciously, when I'm pulling out a J-frame or an LCR or something like that, I have to consciously go, Ryan, you got to bury that front sight. It's more of a wrist thing where you're going, this is different. It's a different feel.
Yeah, 100%. That's we're in the golden age of red dots. And I have revolvers with red dots on them. My competition gun in 1990 was a revolver with a red dot. Yeah,
it's new, Darryl.
Yeah, everybody's all you're an old curmudgeon and don't like red dots. I guarantee I was running one before you were. But with these little guns, we've also got some great sights out there for them.
Yeah.
And we're big on Apparently, my wife has an entire drawer of front sight paint. I don't know if that's what she uses it for, but I do.
I don't know all the colors.
Yeah, I got all sorts of cool colors that are neon-y and bright, that we can do some modifications to see those sights. We've got stuff like, an excess type sight or something where we're running, a very visible front sight of whatever it is to really get those to punch that sight on to target. But again, mastery even of iron sights today is a bit of a new thing, and kind of almost with how we really use these guns a lot with the snubs. It's getting a really visible front sight on those guns, a really usable type front sight on that gun to get that thing to block your vision and X out scary things with a bright thing attached to the front of your gun. And those sort of both eyes open work, they blend in really well actually with the red dot training.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of a different thing. The revolvers tend to be really good at all the stuff the autos aren't, and the autos tend to be really good at all the things the revolvers are not. So to me, they're a supplement to each other.
Yeah, it's another tool in the toolbox, right?
I've always got a small revolver on me, and when I leave the house to get in the car to go somewhere, that sort of criteria of I'm actually putting a key in the car and leaving my world, I generally have a small semi-automatic pistol in my waistband.
Yeah.
But I always have, from the time I wake up in the morning to go to bed at night, I always have a small revolver on my person.
Awesome. Guys, talk about, as we wrap this up, talk about American Fighting Revolver and what you guys are doing over there.
Well, that was a plan that was hashed out on a trip to Louisiana when we were doing some consulting on that UC project. I said, we're kind of two people that have this revolver experience behind us that is unique, like the mechanical side, and we've got the end user side that's done everything from trained police work. So I'm like, we should probably form a company and do something with that, Darryl. Right? Let's make this official and get a logo. And we started that, and we started initially on another platform that was not gun friendly. So we started a paywall website, and that was so that we could keep the content away from the people that don't like guns. And there's a bar for entry there, and it's pretty minuscule. So we run AmericanFightingRevolver.com, and every Wednesday right now we publish a Wheel Gun Wednesday feature on some historical guns, some modern service style revolvers, police trade-in guns, custom guns. To coin the phrase from Justin Dial, we love all of God's children, and we do profiles on all the major brands. We have some of the gun companies send us guns and say, hey, will you evaluate these? So it's turned also into a bit of a consulting business. And then we have a training component. You got to see that with Colt. Yep. I was surprised at SHOT Show when I heard they were like, hey, we need a couple of guys to do a Python experience, and like nobody remembers how to do revolvers. And
how does this work?
Chris Sereno says, I know a couple dudes, so
awesome.
They're but yeah, that's kind of how it all came together. The website, we also sell some product on there. We do a little e-commerce with some pocket holsters and some things like that, because we're working with secondary support companies to make secondary accessories better and also more available. And we kind of want to be the one-stop hub. So that's still developing, but AmericanFightingRevolver.com is where we're at. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
The name came out of, at the time, I was writing a book called Stories of the American Fighting Revolver. I have a pretty extensive collection of a investment-grade history of the fighting revolver where we actually have the guns. I mean, we own the guns. And that's kind of, and what we did basically is took that book and translated it into a digital format where it's almost a video magazine type thing. So we'll have some articles and videos that are sort of what we grew up on.
Yeah.
We are missing some of the greatest gun writers in the world. That's what this industry is missing, is people who can kind of tell the stories about stuff. Anybody can do a video review. to actually tell
anyone.
Well, some are better than others, but we know that some of these platforms are filled with people making stuff up.
Sure.
On doing I'm doing a review of this. You have no idea what we're doing is we're bringing that historical value back of telling a story through a gun. And most of the guns we feature of the historical ones have fantastic stories behind them. Yep. They have soul in those guns. And we let the gun sort of tell a wonderful story of the 1900s, of these guns that were used for real in some of the most dangerous times in our thing, and we can learn a lot, and then we kind of translate that into the modern guns of what can we learn from our history. So we kind of do a whole lot, and as Brian said, we're agnostic. We'll work with anybody who wants to move the ball forward. And it's been, a real pleasure with you guys. I mean, I've been on with your dad before, back in the day, talking on the radio about revolvers and where they still fit in this. And it's not to the discount of anybody else. Brian and I both got a bunch of soulless polymer disposable pistols. I mean, we use them, but we really love these things, you know. I mean, this is a bit of a passion, and some of the guns we carry are soulless disposable revolvers.
Like you said, I mean, a Camry is a very sensible, dependable vehicle, but no one's going to come up and stop you in the grocery store parking lot to ask you about your Camry. You could drive a 69 Mustang that's not dependable and doesn't have power steering and all these things, but it turns heads.
Yeah, right. and I'm kind of into the compromise. There's a reason I have a Raptor.
I like my comforts.
Yeah, I like my speed and I have a muscle truck. But it's electronic fuel injection and serviced by a thing. And so we love all of this stuff, and we're just trying to keep this alive in our little side of the universe of the gun world. It's a big place. Yeah. There's a lot of room for everybody, and we've kind of carved out this niche. And the best thing that's come out of this is we're now talking to people like you guys and, kind of recognizing, rather than try to wing a Python experience, these alliances allow us to come in here, work with you guys to put on a great event. By the same token, with the manufacturers, when we come in and consult on a revolver, we're giving you something a lot of people don't get, and we think it's really good for the consumer on the back end that, hey, maybe some people who really understand these guns put some input into it, as opposed to, we made it neon purple, and that's what, that's great, but that's probably not going to make a better revolver, you know? So we're really trying to hit this market of, it's not a, it's just something we do to make it better for everybody. It's not for everybody, but we really do want to make it accessible to good information. And that's what this is all about, is just really getting good information, good training out to the public.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Good to talk to you guys again.
Good to be here.
As always,
thanks.
We always love being here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming down. All right. Well, hope we got you all juiced up on revolvers. Now you're thinking about getting maybe another one. That's it for us. We'll see you next time on Gun Talk Nation. To see all of Gun Talk's content, go to guntalk.com, guntalktv.com, or sign up for the Gun Talk newsletter.